melatonin. You think about it for sleep, but on this episode, you're going to learn that it is the key for a good immunity, gut health, brain health, and goes beyond. However, you have to use high dose melatonin. We're going to tell you how to dose it, the products. Yes, some are oral and some are suppository. But on this show, Dr. John Lieurance, he's been on other shows, one of my good friends. We also talk about some surprising cellular biohacks into the mitochondria. Have you heard of methylene blue? Oh man, what a biohack. I love this product. Wait till you hear more. Check out the episode.
Hey, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, CytoDetox. Look, podcasts cost money. There's a lot of production going around this, but we are grateful to have CytoDetox as one of the sponsors. It's so easy for me to talk about the product because myself and my family use it constantly as we practice what I preach. For over 15 years, I've talked about and taught doctors and the public about cellular detox. And I'll tell you, Cyto was a breakthrough. Cyto was a breakthrough for us. And it's changed so many lives. So we're grateful that they sponsor Cellular Healing TV. It makes sense, doesn't it? They should.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing Cyto Detox product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit detoxoffer.com. Again, that's detoxoffer.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith, and today we welcome back Dr. John Lieurance. Dr. John is a naturopathic physician, chiropractic neurologist, and author who has been in private practice in Florida for 27 years. Dr. John wrote the book Melatonin Miracle Molecule, which some experts consider one of the most comprehensive books on the benefits to supplementing with melatonin. And it's not just about sleep. I can't wait to hear more. So let's get started and welcome Dr. John Lieurance and Dr. Pompa. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Well, John, let me start here by telling everybody, and I've said this on past shows, you've been on Cell TV before, and watch those episodes. We've done shows on hearing, adjusting the cranium. I mean, we've done all kinds of great shows. But, you know, he's one of my docs, right? I go to Sarasota, Florida, my wife and I, and we always get treated by Dr. John. So thank you for that. And my family, you've helped Daniel, you've helped many in my family. So you're a blessing to us. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And yeah, absolutely. We love you. And we become friends. You come out, you were just out here in Park City and spent some quality time with you as well. So it's gone beyond just business for you and I, but this topic is one that we both resonate with. Melatonin. If you bring up the topic melatonin, everyone's going to be like, that doesn't work for me for sleep. Okay, sleep's one thing. We'll touch upon that. However, this is gut health. This is immune health, cell health. I mean, there is so much here, and we're not just talking about 9 milligrams of melatonin. We're talking about 200 milligrams. What? 200 milligrams of melatonin? Can you do that much? All right. Well, arguably, if you don't do that much, you might not see the benefits we're talking about. So obviously, you want to stay tuned here for what we're going to be talking about. And I know John and I, we're going to rabbit tail into some of our favorite topics on the mitochondria and some of the biohacks that we experiment. One is called methylene blue. You'll have to stay tuned for that because John, I just had a great experience. We'll talk about that. I'm going to be interviewing the doctor that I went to because of my experience, and it was because of you. All right, let's start off, John. Melatonin, come on, man. It's just for sleep, right? And
right.
But tell us about it.
Well, that's what I thought at one point. And, I was first introduced to the concept of super physiological dosing of melatonin from a colleague of mine, Dr. Frank Schallenberger, who you as well know. And I went to his clinic and actually followed him around for a few days. And I watched him put patient after patient after patient on massive doses of melatonin. I mean, 200 milligrams. And he was dosing people at night. He was dosing people during the day, which I was like, Dr. Schallenberger, like, how do people tolerate that during the day? And
Yeah.
Surprisingly, when you have light in your eyes, it doesn't activate melatonin in the brain in the same way. So most people can actually dose it. And, and then the second question, I think a lot of people listening to this, well, why would you want to dose that much? And then why would you want to dose it during the day?
Right.
And that's why you want to really pay attention to this episode, because what you're going to find is that melatonin is literally one of the most miraculous molecules that I've ever witnessed. And the more you learn about it, the more that you can discover that, a quality, vital life, a life that is free of inflammation and full of cellular energy, relies heavily on melatonin. And I want to get into kind of the inner workings of that. And some of the things that I hear people say, oftentimes when we start talking about melatonin in general, is, does it stop your own production of melatonin?
Right.
In other words,
Yeah.
if I take it, am I going to stop producing my own melatonin?
Right.
And most hormones have this negative feedback loop, but melatonin, for whatever reason, God put us together in a certain way, and it does not shut down your endogenous production. And you can take as much as, they did studies where it would be like 150,000 milligrams for an adult, our size. And they stopped the study because all they saw was the animals were just getting a little bit tired. So they basically concluded that there's literally no toxicity at all to melatonin.
And by the way, I can attest to, I can do super high doses, 500 milligrams at night, maybe for 2 nights. Next night, stop, take nothing, and sleep completely normal. Meaning that if it were true that your body would stop producing its own, then definitely when you stop taking high dose melatonin, you would have a lag where you couldn't fall asleep, but it simply doesn't happen.
Yeah. I haven't seen that kind of fall off with myself or a lot of the patients that I've dosed melatonin. Like if they run out of it, it's not like they have this terrible night the night after. It's interesting how that situation exists. And I know that there's a lot of misinformation out there on melatonin, and there's so many people that are afraid of it. There's a lot of healthcare practitioners that are advising against it. There's a thought, it's an old antiquated thought that less is more with melatonin, that tiny, almost like 0.5 milligram or 1 milligram is really adequate. And so perhaps we need to look at the reasoning of taking melatonin. Now, some people might look at melatonin for sleep, right? And so lower doses of melatonin may or may not work for a lot of people for sleep. Sometimes taking higher amounts of melatonin works better for sleep for some people, and other people taking a small amount of melatonin works fabulous for them for sleep. But what if we look at just the ability for our bodies to be more resilient to stress? I know you talk a lot about hormesis, and hormesis is your ability to actually have a higher ceiling to stress so that we have more of a window where we can push our signaling factors, which is our adaptive response in our body, for our bodies to actually get stronger and be able to handle that stress at a higher level the next time we're exposed to it, right? That's why we were designed that way. And so literally melatonin is one of the primary players with this whole story. So whenever we have stress, there's one common thread, is that there's cytokines related to that stress. There's a certain set of inflammatory molecules that your body chooses to respond to, like for instance, a sunburn, right? That stress to your skin, there's going to be a certain inflammatory response that's going to be a signature for that type of stress, versus exercise, versus if you were to be exposed to mold, And so what happens is at a cellular level, those stresses, oh boy, we've got a guest.
Yeah, exactly. He had to come see me.
Where's Lonnie?
Yeah,
Here, Lonnie.
This is my son's little dog. Some viewers probably haven't seen it. This one's called Yankee. He's
Oh, I know. Yankey's so
micro
cute.
golden doodle,
Like a teddy bear.
right? I know he is. He's like a little teddy bear. Anyway,
Yeah.
so point.
Yeah. So melatonin's really at the core because when, all diseases really have an inflammatory core to it, right? And so it's that inflammation that we need to buffer. And if we can buffer that inflammation and maintain energy production and quench that oxidation at the same time, then we can get through just about every stress that we're exposed to.
So let me just pull that into present day time of stress that some people may not be thinking about as a stress, right? Is COVID, right? So we have a virus. That viruses are great stresses, and if your stress bucket, as I call it, is already very full, that stress could send you over the edge. You could end up with what we call long haulers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you just simply haven't felt well since COVID. So what you're saying is melatonin, and by the way, you mentioned cytokines, and to our viewers and listeners, cytokines activate your immune system. It's an adaptation that can be very normal, but if cytokine production continues, that's a bad thing. And people watching this have heard, oh, this virus can stimulate this cytokine storm, and these are people that get very sick. Well, so you're saying that melatonin can help buffer that, help your body adapt to the stress, any stress, right? And viral in this topic. And by the way, I know, and I want you to share that high dose melatonin seems to be an answer for this virus for people who are either, going into long haulers or just simply to get well. So it's something that obviously helps the immune system, but the adaptation of the stress of the virus.
Well, so let me break that down. So when you have an exposure to any infection, there is a lot of inflammation that occurs, and that inflammation, when it affects the cell through these cytokines, shunts our way of making energy from one type of energy to one that's like 10% effective.
That's right.
So if you can imagine that you were at war and you had all these troops, right? You had say you had 100 troops, right? And you're going to fight this battle. And all of a sudden you have 10 troops. You think you're going to win that battle or you're going to lose that battle, right? You're more likely to lose it. So if this is your immune system that's actually battling a virus,
right,
then all of a sudden we're losing this battle. And that's where the cytokine storm plays a role. And that's what happens. And, a lot of people do die of pneumonia from the fever and from the flu. I mean, that's like one of the main ways that we as a human race die in old age. And you have to ask yourself, why are children not getting sick and dying? And you look at the graph on melatonin, you can see how that graph really reflects deaths from various viruses, and including COVID. Right. And so, my personal opinion is I think that our melatonin levels play a big role in our ability to survive many types of stress, including infection stress.
Yeah. So makes the argument for, obviously high dose, whether you're sick already or you're preventing, high dose melatonin would be absolutely beneficial. Okay, so we're kind of already scraping into immunity, right? Mm-hmm. Another thing that plays into immunity that we have used high dose melatonin, and by the way, we have to talk about delivery because we have two deliveries for this. We have oral dosing through liposome technology for, helps the absorption, and then we have suppository. Now, I know that the suppository has a tremendous impact on the gut, where it causes something called swarming, where it increases your microbiome. So talk a little bit about that, because that plays into immunity. If we're talking about gut health, which is what we're talking about here, it's going to play into immunity as well.
That's funny, because literally right after I said my last little sentence, I was thinking I wanted to transition into gut, and then here we are. Oh. Great minds think alike. Right. I love the fact that we're transitioning to gut, because it's such an important part of a strong immune system. And in fact, just a strong person in general. And the microbiome is a big part of that. And, when we started this conversation, we talked about why would you want to take large amounts? And then how is melatonin something important beyond sleep? And I think we've already kind of addressed, that really important aspect of cellular energy under stress. With regards to the gut, there's 400 times more melatonin that's produced in the gut than in the brain. And so when you think about it in that context, you start to think, okay, well, so if I take melatonin, there's reasons for me to take this based on the research. If you go to melatoninbook.com, we're going to be doing a free book giveaway. But if you read my book, Melatonin Miracle Molecule, and you start going through chapter by chapter, you're going to start seeing.
And by the way, we're going to put a link in here to get a online version. What do you call it? The actual book's not edited yet, but right now you can get an online version. So we'll put a link in here. So Ashley's on that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So each chapter, so we have chapters on gut, neurology, skin. We have chapters on, obviously sleep. There's chapters on psychological, there's liver, there's diabetes, there's cancer, literally almost every disease you can think of. There's been research on melatonin, and not just in small doses. Oftentimes these research are going into higher dose. And every time, at the end of each chapter, you're just going to see reference after reference after reference. So it's not just, Dan and John saying, hey, take melatonin. This is like one of the most researched molecules, I think, on the planet. So if you were looking to get some of those benefits beyond sleep, and the gut produces 400 times more melatonin than the brain, then it just makes sense that we would want to start looking at higher doses, because we're wanting to affect more than just the circadian rhythm. We're looking to actually affect the body at a cellular level. And so when you look at the microbiome, to answer your question, you'd asked me about how it affects the microbiome. These bacteria are literally on a circadian rhythm, just like we are. And so, we're awake, we're active during the day. This is a whole different set of hormones, a lot of different signaling factors, versus when we're sleeping. Our body is more in a repair phase. We're more in a parasympathetic situation, where during the day we're more in a sympathetic situation. So our sleep is where the microbiome does the same thing, where it actually rebuilds itself. And there's a name for that. It's called microbiome swarming. And melatonin is the primary activator of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we've seen that. I've had a lot of severe gut cases where things orally are not as effective for them. They start doing high dose melatonin suppositories, and I get an email or some message back. Wow, for some reason this has seemed to help my gut, because I probably was giving it to them and they were hoping it was going to help their sleep, which maybe it did. But the surprise was, oh my gosh, it's really helped my gut for the very reason that you spoke about. And again, obviously that plays into immunity. It plays into a lot of other aspects when you improve the gut. And I would argue it's playing into just brain health in general. I'm sure you discussed that in your book.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is there a relationship with other neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, feel good type of neurotransmitters?
Well, so whenever you have stress responses in the body, there's going to be a lot of shifts in chemistry. And so especially inflammation, inflammation, when it's high in the body, is going to be an activator of the sympathetic nervous system. And when we have a sympathetic activation, it shuts our gut down, and it shuts the blood supply to our brain down, actually. We start to shunt blood to areas where we could run away from an animal, or we could survive, or run or hide. And so what I'm seeing is that the vast majority of the population of the patients I see, they're all stuck in this fight or flight or sympathetic state. And so one of the things that we can look at to measure that is heart rate variability. This used to be something a lot of athletes would use, but now a lot of people doing biohacking or health experts and a lot of doctors are looking at it. And so heart rate variability is the way I look at it is you have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system that's acting on the heart, right? And so what you want is you want the sympathetic to come in a little bit and you want the parasympathetic to come in a little bit. And so when either one of this is in control of the heart, then the heart's going to either go up or down, right? And so that variation is actually really healthy. So you want a high heart rate variability where there's more variation, which means that there's more of an equal innervation from the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. What happens as we get older, and again, I'm going to go back to this graph on melatonin. When you look at melatonin and age, you can actually imprint a graph on heart rate variability, and it goes and follows that same pathway. And one of the things I'm seeing with my patient base is that they're blown away at how amazing that doing melatonin is, high dose melatonin, to their heart rate variability, and their sleep scores actually improve quite a bit.
Yeah, so many of us have this Aura ring, which I love. And one of the reflections on the recovery, it measures your sleep and recovery. They utilize heart rate variability to do that. And again, melatonin has an impact on that. You can see it, right? Which is pretty cool. Let's talk about, I do want to talk about how to dose it, but before I get there, or how to use it, right? Because I mentioned oral, I mentioned suppository. How many days a week do I do high dose, et cetera? We'll get into that. But so who are you telling to do this? Like, who are you saying, oh, you have to do this? Certain conditions, symptoms across the board, what?
Well, my practice consists of a lot of patients with mold and biotoxin illness and Lyme. But I also see a lot of patients with various degenerative neurologic diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and things like that. And then we also see a lot of patients that are, older, because I'm in Sarasota and we have a much older population. And so, the patient base that I'm working with are great candidates for high dose melatonin. So, really, I think in today's day, so it's like, I get this question a lot of times and it's like, okay, so like, who should take it, right? But it's like, let's put it in the drinking water. Everybody should take it, but then that kind of takes some credibility away from, I think, when you start talking about it, because people that don't fully understand it sounds a little bit crazy. But when you're talking about the environment that we're living in right now, we have not adapted to be able to really thrive, with all of the stressors, the EMF. A lot of people don't realize, like, EMF, one of the negative things that it does is it actually goes and it affects your pineal to trick you to think that it's actually sun, so it can have a dramatic decline in melatonin. So light pollution, at night, if you've got the regular lights on at your house, if you're watching TV, if you're looking at your cell phone or your iPad, you're getting all this like really negative light pollution that's actually activating your brain, which is going to suppress, when you finally do go to sleep and you're looking to release melatonin. So we have so many stressors that we weren't, that we're not adapted to be able to handle, that I think that there's more of a need for something like melatonin than there might have been, say, 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For me, for what you just said, just to mitigate those types of stressors, a few times a week, I do a high dose suppository. Okay. Every once in a while, I will dose it orally, high dose, and suppository, especially if I feel like I need to like really get like just that deep recovery type of sleep, and just take a load of stress off, whether it's travel stress, emotional stress, physical stress. That's kind of when I do those doses. That's me, right? I can tell you, I have a lot of clients who when we're detoxing, they like to do it on cycle because the detox is an extra stress, right? And it helps them on their detox cycles. So let's talk about
traveling across time zones is an amazing time to use these high doses.
Absolutely. I do it because I travel so much, right? And people don't realize this, but when you're flying in airplanes, you get a lot of radiation stress. So there's an argument. Okay, so let's talk about how to do it, right? So we talked about taking it at the daytime. When would I do that? Why would I do that? We obviously can take it at night, oral, suppository. You have different products. So let's give the products their names and when you would say and how to take them.
Yeah, so we make a product called Sandman.
We're gonna have them on. So if you go to Revelation Health, where you typically buy your products, and put in the code REV, you'll get a discount on the products, and you'll be able to get the products. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, so Sandman, we have it in 4 different versions. We have a Sandman and a Super Sandman, and both of those come in both a liposomal, which is oral, and also a suppository. And so for people learning about suppositories for the first time, let's kind of dive into that a little bit.
Let's dive into that. Be careful of that. You know, it's funny. I have to say a funny story. Okay. And I'm debating on using.
Oh, no, Dan, don't go there.
But anyways, no, because she's going to be watching this and she's going to be cracking up. She's going to know who I'm talking about. Anyway,
let's just say that there can be some risk associated with doing it, especially if you're out driving around, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It wasn't that. However, that could be, but it was kind of along that line. But okay, I'll be nice. She just has this thing about, putting something, that way up into her body, right? Okay, so, and because of that, it just doesn't work out for her. She keeps, saying it was leaking out. I kept saying, well, you're not getting it up high enough. So tip, push it up higher, folks, okay? And then you won't get the poops, like, I gotta go, right? Because that is an issue with suppository, John. People go, that's my wife, I gotta lay down. Oh my God, I gotta go. I always say, you're not pushing it up high enough. In her case, I don't even think she was getting it in completely because she was adverse to the whole idea of anything, going in the rectum. But so let's give some tips here because
let's do it. So I really see it as kind of it's really no big deal. The suppositories are shaped kind of like a bullet. So as soon as it kind of starts going, it just kind of like moves up there on its own, and because it's made with an organic palm oil, it's already slippery and it's solid at room temperature, but we like people to store it in the refrigerator. So, it's the benefit of it, most people that wind up using our suppositories, they're either sick and they're really just looking to do whatever it takes to get better. And I found in my earlier experience, when I was really ill, that suppositories were the game changer for me.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get in and get IVs enough. And so for me, being able to do it on my own really made a lot of sense, and the expense is a lot less. So when you talk about a suppository and the benefit that it would have to someone that's looking to have a change from a certain nutrient, you want to talk about peak plasma. So peak plasma is the amount, it's the time that nutrient is as at a high level in your bloodstream, which means that the cells can actually pull it inside. So when that peak plasma starts to go down, the cells are it's no longer available to get intracellular. So if you were to take a pill, most oral products, you've got peak plasma, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. So it's not a lot of time for your cells to absorb. Where a suppository, it's kind of a slow bleed into the bloodstream over 5 to even 7 hours. So it's even better than that because you're skipping your stomach acid, you're skipping first pass through the liver, and you literally destroy the vast majority of the things that you eat through that process alone. So with those two things in mind, the suppositories can make a lot of sense. So that's my suppository spiel.
Yeah, no, and I find people with just a lot of gut issues, bypassing the gut, a stressed microbiome, it can be a huge benefit doing a suppository. So, okay, great. You put melatonin in at night, you're going to have this slower release, peak plasma, more melatonin release at night. Because if you take it orally before bed, people say this, it helps get me to sleep, but then I wake up, can't get back to sleep. One of the things we find with suppository, especially high dose, is that it is releasing more through the night, and it tends to keep people asleep better. Okay, so that's just a sleep talk, but also you're getting all of those other benefits that we mentioned for a longer time. But you do have an oral product as well. Talk about that.
Well, so the oral product is going to have a faster onset, so what's nice about that is you take it and within 20, 30 minutes, you're feeling like you're ready to go to bed. The suppository,
that's why I mentioned I like to sometimes do both, because
exactly.
I like that boom, immediate knock me out, and I like what carries through the night.
Yeah, and it's funny, that's kind of what I've been gravitating towards as well, is combining the two together. And have been having, a lot of my patients do the same thing and getting some good feedback on that. So so kind of back to it. So we have the Super Sandman and we have the regular Sandman, right? And they both come in suppository or liposomal.
And which remind us of the milligram doses difference.
I was about to do. So the regular Sandman has 200 milligrams of melatonin and 250 grams of glutathione. So for those that are looking to kind of have both dosing that, and the reason that glutathione's in there, not only because it's another one of the master antioxidants, but it's also one of the sleep promoting substances. So there's actually some good research on how it improves sleep. Great for reducing inflammation and different things like that. The Super Sandman doesn't have any glutathione in it at all. However, it has twice as much melatonin. So it literally has 425 milligrams of melatonin.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the oral dosing doesn't taste great, I'll be honest, but I don't care because I love the effect. Talk about how I already said, I do it hit and miss. Obviously I don't have a sleep problem, but it does make me sleep more deep and have better recovery. But with the average person, when should they do this? How often? And what's some of your recommendations?
Yeah. So if I had a patient that came to me that might have like an illness, or an issue that they're looking to overcome, I might look at having them do, a 2 or 3 month program where they're taking it every night. I have a fasting protocol. You and I have actually done a lot of work on the design of it. And
I love it.
And so, if we have somebody that we're fasting, then I like dosing melatonin in the refeeding, because you're going to get a breakdown in the microbiome during the fast. And then you've got this strong activation to the microbiome to swarm when you start eating and feeding again. So that's a good opportunity to take high dose melatonin. And then of course, if you're going to travel, but I think a lot of people that, may not want to take the full dive and take it every night. There's a lot of benefit to doing something like that 2-3 nights a week.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I tend to do for sure. What about people, and this is kind of just a general melatonin conversation, right? This was part of the conversation I had last night, before we got into the suppository part of the conversation. I can't do melatonin. I just get overstimulated. It keeps me awake. What do you recommend there, or why is that?
Well, there's a couple things to consider. There is some research and data suggesting that melatonin may be a strong detoxifier. It may cause a lot of heavy metals and chemicals to be released from the brain. So sometimes when people first start taking melatonin, there might be some temporary side effects that could include them being extremely groggy the next day. It could be that there's what's called a paradoxical effect, which means an opposite effect, where they actually get a little bit energized. Imagine if you had, your house, right? And you're tired and you're just overworked and you come home and the last thing you want to do is clean your house. And you can imagine if you just didn't have the energy and motivation, your house would get pretty dirty. So the cells actually have the same type of situation where they're just fatigued. And so if we have an energy that's driven by mitochondria and we have that mitochondria dip down to 10% of what it would normally make, and then all of a sudden it goes back to 100%, it's going to start doing some house cleaning. And so I always encourage people to really push through 2, 3, 4 days or so before they really judge the melatonin.
Let me tell you how I worked with that. It seems to work. You probably figured this out, but I tell them dose it in the day if it's giving you energy. And then it seems like when they start dosing it in the day, then all of a sudden they're able to take it at night without the stimulatory effect. So I always say, give it a week, dose it during the day, and then try it at night and see if it works. If it doesn't, then keep dosing it during the day. And I feel like eventually your body starts to accept it at night and actually make you sleepy. That's been my experience. Now, I have to say, there's a little warning here, because when I first did high dose melatonin, I woke up groggy the next day. And so I can say that only happened 1 or 2 nights. And then I just pushed through it. How common is that? And is it that way for everybody?
Well, there's some people have poor, clearance pathways, particularly through the liver. And so if the best thing, so anybody listening to this, ask themselves, are you sensitive to caffeine? And if you take a small amount of caffeine, you find that, you're wired for a long period of time versus what is normal, then you're probably going to have the same experience with melatonin, which means that when you take it, it's going to last longer in your system before it's broken down. So what we do with cases like that is similar to what you've discovered with the paradoxical effects, is we'll have them dose it early. We might even have them dose it before dinner, because then by the time they wake up, they've had enough time to clear it.
Right. Yeah. If I was smarter, I would have done that. But I did kick out of it. I like I said, I can't remember. It only happened 1, maybe 2 nights. But then I don't know what happened, but my body got used to it. Maybe I just needed deep sleep. I don't know. But I think
what time are you dosing these people that have the paradoxical effect? Are you dosing them at lunch or?
You mean when I tell them to take it during the day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally I just tell them to take it after their morning evacuation, because that way they're not, again, it helps with the poop feeling. I mean, if they go and put it up, chances are they keep it in, because I found that was the complaint during the day is, during the day, it's like I end up losing it in the toilet, because if you go to the bathroom first thing in the morning, put it in after that.
Nice. That's great.
And if someone says, I don't go till lunch, then my advice would be, okay, well, put it in after you go after lunch, right? So when do you go to the bathroom during the day? Following that is when you're going to hold it the best. Yeah.
And then there's always the liposomal version as well.
Okay. So, we didn't talk about that. We kind of did. We said, that's, if you want that more immediate effect, the liposomal version.
Well, I imagine there's probably a lot of clinicians as well that are listening to this, or health coaches, and this is a subject that I think it has a lot of, a merit. So, if you're dealing with people and you're trying to get them on melatonin and you bump up against some of these challenges where they're either groggy or they're really energized, I think it's a wonderful idea to start dosing them during the day. I actually never even thought about that until you just mentioned it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's worked. Each time I've done that. So it's positive input. As promised, we talked about some of our favorite mitochondrial biohacks. Let's share a few. Look, when you look at why most people don't feel well today, it's the mitochondria. And I mentioned briefly, how many people don't feel well, after getting this virus. And I think we're allowed to actually say the virus name now, so I'm not as afraid of saying the word COVID. But the fact is so many people end up in long haulers, or at least with what they would just say is low energy and brain fog. One of the things for years I've talked about is the cellular danger response, or it's called an integrative stress response. A lot of people don't know this, but we know the mitochondria is where we make ATP or energy, but the mitochondria's second job, and arguably most important job maybe, is its cellular surveillance of stress. When you have a stressor like a virus, one of the things it does is it saves your life, and it changes how your cells use energy, the mitochondria, and it can turn that down. But some people get stuck in the stress response with their mitochondria not functioning. And I believe melatonin, one of the things it does is it helps break people out of that pattern. But also, I think there's some other amazing biohacks, one of which you just introduced me to, which is methylene blue. I bet you most people listening or watching this have never heard of it. What is it, and why would this be something they might want to do to feel better?
Well, so I'm equally as impressed with this particular molecule as I am melatonin. And I never thought I was going to cross another molecule that impressed me as much. But methylene blue, it was invented or was discovered in the late 1800s. And it was originally used as a dye, right? So they would dye tapestries and clothing and so forth. And then they started using it to dye tissues, right? So that they could look at them under a microscope. And what they found was the methylene blue had this ability to be uptaken by the cell and the mitochondria as well, because they could see it, under the microscope. So they started to experiment with it with biology, and they found that it had some really incredible effects, which we can talk about. But one of the first ones that was really applied was its anti-bacterial effect for malaria, actually.
Yeah, malaria.
It was the first FDA drug ever approved. And that was what it was approved for, was malaria. And so it kills the parasite that carries malaria. And it's actually, there's a lot of research showing that it's a powerful antiviral. A friend of mine ran some research in Mexico a year or so ago and was able to show that methylene blue would destroy COVID in like 2 days, and he did this with a fairly large number of people in Mexico, and took it to the FDA thinking, hey, they're going to embrace this. And this is like, I'm going to change the world. And what they said is, well, that's in Mexicans. We need you to do it with Chinese and Korean and Caucasian. And it basically made it impossible for him to be able to do this research, being just a doctor like you and I with limited resources. So he really just gave up. But the applications for this molecule with today's, issues is monumental. And I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, but it certainly is in my clinic.
Yeah.
With regards to there, another really interesting thing is the word magic bullet, right? We've all heard that word, right? And there was a German that coined that term. And what he had in mind was a molecule that would have far-reaching and amazing benefits to the human body, but it would leave the body unharmed. And he was actually referring to methylene blue.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, we know it's an electron donor. I mean, it just like feeds electrons, and I don't want to get into the deep science here, but how you make energy in your mitochondria is an electron transport chain, right? And it's just like, it feeds it. It just upregulates ATP. And another one of our favorite molecules, NAD+, which, by the way, you have a suppository and a liposome product for NAD instead of doing the painful IVs, or at least the lengthy IVs, meaning you have to sit there for 6 hours. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But the methylene blue, there's different deliveries as well. One which is simply oral and suppository.
Yeah. Actually, the NAD suppository has methylene blue in it, and has, since its conception, as part of what my vision of like the ultimate mitochondria support. But you're absolutely right. So methylene blue, once it gets into the mitochondria, basically is there just donating electrons, allowing your cells to literally make just crazy amounts of energy.
Yeah.
And this is what makes methylene blue such a powerful molecule. Besides the fact that it's antiviral, antibacterial, antiparasitic, another indication that methylene blue was used for and approved for was chronic urinary tract infections. So, have you noticed the color of your urine?
Yeah. It was, well, it was like bluish green actually. So if your urine's yellow, then it's going to kind of tint it to a green color. Yes. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
And that can go on for a day or two after you consume some methylene blue. I mean, we're using some protocols here in the clinic where we're using IVs. And one of the things that is really, if you really want to maximize your use of methylene blue, you want to use light. So particularly red light in the 660 nanometers. And that really activates methylene blue very beautifully. And so what do I mean by activating it? So methylene blue is considered photobiomodulator. So it's photodynamic, meaning that when you combine light with the methylene blue, it's like an entourage effect. It's like 1 + 1 instead of equaling 2, it equals 4, right? You have this exponential benefit. So when we look at light therapy, because I know you're big on like red light panels, and so am I. And so we look at the effect of the sun and of these red light panels and the research that NASA did, just showing it can extend life, it can improve your cellular energy, it can help a variety of different diseases because it works on energizing your cells. That works on one aspect of what's called the cytochrome complex, right? So this is a complex that's designed for us as humans to be able to capture light and to turn it into energy. Methylene blue works on all 4.
Yeah.
And so it accentuates the light that's coming in, but then it turns on literally all 4 of these pathways. So what we're doing here clinically is we're running methylene blue as an IV. And then what we're doing is we're activating it with a laser that actually goes in the arm. So it's like a catheter, right?
Right.
And then after that, we're putting them in like a small room that has panels all around on the walls. So they're just, they have no clothes on. They're just getting submerged by the red light through their whole body. And then we put them in the CVAC pod, or we put them in a hyperbaric chamber. Because once we get that system working, we start to push oxygen in there, and it's really magical. Right. So, this is all fine and dandy, but if you can't make it to my clinic, then you can do something similar that's, I feel, very powerful at home by using a methylene blue suppository or taking methylene blue oral. We're actually I formulated a methylene blue nasal spray just recently that we're going to be adding to our product line. And then,
which I could imagine would be fantastic because methylene blue crosses the blood-brain barrier. And I've read many animal studies for neurodegenerative conditions. They're doing it for Alzheimer's, dementia, with incredible results. I mean, just it's amazing it hasn't caught on more, I guess is my point.
Yeah. The other, for brain, it's amazing. For brain, for heart, for cardiovascular, for mood, it is absolutely stellar. I mean, so when you start getting into, beyond the microdose of methylene blue, so, dosing wise, as long as you're under 10 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, there hasn't really been a lot in the research that says that there's going to be any trouble. One of the main concerns is when you start getting into really high doses is that if you're taking SSRIs or MAO inhibitors, then you can get you into a little bit of trouble. But it actually acts as a SSRI. So when you start getting into these, 3, 4, 5, to 10 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, there's just a tremendous, you feel happy, you feel grounded, you feel, you feel good.
Yeah.
It has almost like an antidepressant.
Yeah, I had that experience. So what's the name of the products? And we'll make sure that they can get them here.
Lumitol Blue. Yeah. And so we have a 300 milligram suppository that we really recommend. This is more of the oral application. And the 60 milligram is what we recommend more for the suppository. Now, the reason that we created it this way is that we don't want people's mouths to turn blue, right? So we take a fairly strong, a 300 milligrams is a pretty strong methylene blue dose, and you cut it into quarters, and then you can take. So it's basically methylene blue in a suspension inside of the suppository, oil there, right? The palm oil. And so you just take that chunk and you put it in the back of your throat, and you just drink it down.
You have to send me more, by the way, because you better make a note of that. But anyways, yeah, no, I still love it. And then we mentioned a little bit the NAD plus, which you said, you've had that product out for a while, which has, I'm not sure the dose of
20 milligrams.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that's a suppository. Now, you've had the NAD oral. Is there methylene blue in that product too?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. Share the names of those just so people can write it down.
NAD Max. Yeah. So that comes in a suppository and a liposomal.
Yeah. So one of my favorite products. I would say the same for many people watching this who have used it. So yeah. And then you get the NAD plus, the methylene blue, and the NAD Max, or the methylene blue product, which is the Lumitol blue, which you can also look for. So, man, John, we gave him more information. This is life-changing episode as usual with Dr. John.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, we gave him so many biohacks. We're at the top of the hour already. It went so fast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you do a great interview, Dan, and I you had start this episode, talking about, our friendship. And I just like to say how dear you are to me and your family. And it's just been an honor to have you in my life and to be able to, contribute to the health of your family.
Yeah. You're a blessing to us, John, as well. And we love and appreciate you, man. And we love coming to Sarasota just to biohack around your clinic, and you've opened that up to us many times. And it's been a blessing to our health and more than health. So thank you, John.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, CytoDefend. Look, at a time like this, I think that our immune system and keeping our immune system up right now is more important than ever. I can also tell you that I pay attention to the things that keep my immune system on par and healthy. So glad that CytoDefend is one of our sponsors here on Cell TV. And it's a product that I use, my family uses, and hopefully you'll check it out. And by the way, you can check it out with the link right here below. If you want to try a free bottle, you can actually get a free bottle, just pay the shipping. And I think you'll reorder after that, but check it out.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing CytoDefend product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit freeimmunity.com. Again, that's freeimmunity.com. Well, that's it for this week. The materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you would like to purchase some of the supplements mentioned on this show, please visit the site asseenonchtv.com and use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. Again, that's asseenonchtv.com. Use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. And as always, thanks for listening.